In my opinion, it comes down to aligned incentives. And I'm not talking about compensation. I'm talking about incentives of the organizations or the departments within the organization. And so, for example, what's the most fundamental difference between marketing and sales for somebody on the outside of it? It's, well, sales closes business, marketing gets the leads, right? But if you flip that and you say, hang on, marketing's not just getting the leads and sales not just closing the business.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Health Launchpad and HIMSS. Well, hi, I'm Adam Chirinas. I'm Health Launchpad founder and CEO, and I'm your host for today. I want to give a big thank you to my longtime partner, HIMSS. I'm so privileged to be doing this podcast with them, a wonderful company to partner with. And I also want to give a big thank you to you for joining us today. And I hope we can give you something of real value. And really, that's what this podcast is about. Anybody who spent 5 minutes in healthcare, selling to healthcare systems or any other type of healthcare organizations like payers, knows the hard way that there is really, I can't think of any other category which is as hard to sell to. And I've been in lots of other industries, and healthcare is the hardest. Sales cycles are longer. People you're trying to reach take forever. And I think there are more people involved in the sales process than in any other B2B category that I've ever been in. And so that's what this show's about. This show's about talking to people like my guest today, and we'll introduce in a minute, who have been in this space for a while and is constantly looking at ways to improve the way that they grow that business, and sharing insights and learning from each other. And that's what this podcast is about. So today I'm so excited to introduce Royce Brunson. Now, Royce is a longtime digital health guy. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of Health Recovery Solutions, a remote monitoring provider. And Royce, I just, welcome to the show and say hi, tell us about yourself and tell us a little bit about HRS as well.
Thanks for the invite. I have cheered you on from the sidelines for quite some time. And so I appreciate our friendship and camaraderie and being a guest on your show. I couldn't agree with what you said more. I think that, when we look at the landscape of businesses, B2B, however you want to look at that landscape, healthcare to me always seems to be kind of far right in terms of complexity of a sale, complexity of marketing, complexity of a number of different factors when looking at it. So I'm excited to chat through that with you today. But my role here at Health Recovery Solutions, as you said, is the Chief Revenue Officer. I'm responsible for nearly the entirety of our go-to-market strategy and teams. Those include sales, marketing, our business development team, our partnership team, our revenue operations team, and a few other things along the way. And we've grown up really in this world of remote patient monitoring here at Health Recovery Solutions. So the business itself is about 10 years old, but we've really gotten our legs and started running here in the last 2 or 3 years. From a numbers perspective, we're currently serving over 250 large enterprise health systems.
That's impressive.
Yeah, well, it's mostly academics. So a lot of the University of fill in the blank, that's kind of our sweet spot, those large integrated health systems. And we've grown the business, since 2019, the business has grown about 400% in terms of top line revenue.
Wow.
And, I always say to folks, you can grow, but that doesn't mean you scale. And so you have to do both in tandem. Yep. And growth will usually pull scale, but you have to be very intentional about the scale piece. You can grow, be at the right market at the right time and happen to grow. We see a lot of businesses do that, right? Not usually in healthcare, but we see that happen. Scale has to be intentional, and scale has to come kind of from the bottom up and the top down. It has to kind of meet in the middle and make sure that it's happening in a really intentional way. So yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's really, I think that's That's so true. The scaling issue is such a challenge. I mean, maybe, one of the advantages of the fact it takes so long to sell anything in healthcare is that you do get a little bit more time to prepare than you do in other markets. I mean, tell me, so, you guys are sort of one of the fairly hot companies in the digital health space. I mean, what do you see going on in digital health, and particularly in your sector, and sort of remote monitoring and virtual care and that? What do you think is going to happen to that over the next few years?
That is I'd say $1 million, but probably multi-billion-dollar question, right? And it's a really interesting place to be, because I always say, if you ask 5 different people what telehealth is, you'll probably get 5 different answers, right?
Yeah, right.
And telehealth is not just virtual visits. Telehealth is what I have on my wrist, right, with Apple Watch. Telehealth is, the new rings with all the sensors in them. That's telehealth. And there's a lot of different companies within this telehealth sphere. You have your, remote patient monitoring organizations like Health Recovery Solutions that play there. I think what you're going to find across all of the different categories is, and as healthcare always does change, it's driven by the providers usually, is that what you're going to find is consolidation, and there's going to be a need for integration. And this is kind of the age-old question in healthcare. But I could tell you, even somebody who's on the day-to-day front lines of implementing and deploying technologies in large integrated health systems, the first 2 questions we get asked are, does it integrate with my EMR?
Yep.
And does it integrate with my other technologies that I have? And one thing, our chief technology officer and I talk about a lot is you have to use integrations as a competitive advantage. And I'm not just talking about integrations with your EMR. I'm talking about the open APIs, the SDKs. Having the ability to integrate beyond just your platform is going to be kind of the key for a lot of folks to win, quote, win, if there is a finish line, win this race in making sure that.
That's so interesting. So beyond the EMR, what are sort of some of the key technologies and platforms you have to integrate with?
Great question. I think the EMR is now table stakes. You have to be able to do the HL7, the other types of integrations, the ORU integrations across the board. I think anyone getting in the digital health space that doesn't offer that, you're probably going to be out sooner than you're in. I think what you're going to see more and more of is integrations with enterprise data warehouses. You're going to see more integrations that are going to be asked through APIs, especially the digital front doors. You see health systems continually trying to create one centralized application for their patients and their providers. If you look at your local health system, I can all but guarantee that they are trying to develop one platform for you to log into and have your labs and your payment, all of that there. Is it a bit of a 2 to 3 year out type, maybe more for some folks? Yes, it is. But we have to skate to where the puck is, not where it's going, not where it's at right now, right? And so that's going to be one of the biggest asks, and that'll come in the form of the SDKs and the different APIs.
So let's talk a little bit about sales and marketing. So tell me about your approach. And so I always get the kind of sense that you're more one of the sort of cutting edge kind of almost sort of, truly SaaS-like in terms of the way that you market. As opposed to some companies where it's a little bit more sort of old school enterprise technology marketing.
Yeah, I think if you start at the highest possible level, what you're going to find is that most organizations tend to think of sales and marketing as 2 different functions. Uh-huh. The world that I kind of operate in and the world I grew up in is more that they're one function that serves the organization really one purpose, which is continue to generate revenue, continue to develop a brand, continue to retain clients, right? And I think that one's job is never done. It's not a baton that you hand off, but rather one that you have to continue to work together as a sales and marketing organization. And that's why, here at HRS, we do have them under one umbrella. And so sales and marketing do work alongside one another. And a lot of times you'll hear folks talk about the funnel and then the pipeline, right? So where is that lead in the funnel? And now once it becomes a lead or a qualified lead, where is it in the pipeline as it develops throughout those opportunity stages? that inherently focuses the teams on thinking that there's two different areas. We tend to flip that. And so they work directly alongside one another. So certainly marketing is focused on lead generation. In most growth stage organization, marketing should contribute about 50% of the pipeline. And so that's where we tend to focus our marketing efforts, is really on demand generation and pipeline generation with those dollars spent and those resources. But just because the lead has come into the organization, or just because it's somebody that we've identified as being qualified within our ideal customer profile, that doesn't mean marketing's job is then done. In fact, most of the time, that's just when it's getting started. And so within the organization, we have both you can think of it as like an acquisition team. So that's where we're focused on acquiring clients, but also a retention team. And our retention team is really focused on retaining clients, avoiding churn, ensuring renewals are happening. And we do that through our marketing efforts throughout the buyer's journey. So once somebody becomes a client, we have KPIs around case studies and content. We do similar to this. We do interviews and podcasts with our folks. And then we also ensure that we're involving them in our product development conversations. I think that anyone
That's very
digital healthcare,
right.
If you're one of the biggest tips I can give anybody in terms of ways to supercharge your client involvement in your company via your marketing efforts, is your marketing team should be running the voice of customer programs that you have, right? And the voice of customer programs are directly overlapping of marketing and product. And that overlap of that Venn diagram, you can do VIP days with your customers, you can do clinical advisory boards and get them involved in the product. But it does take both product and marketing leadership to really be involved in that type of initiative. So
that's really that seamless model that you're describing is unusual, right? It sort of makes sense. I mean, intuitively, why would anybody disagree with it? But I don't think many people are that organized. And so tell me, give me a sense of sort of like how many people is this and how are they organized?
It's, Adam, I do refer to it sometimes as smarketing, sales and marketing together is marketing. Nice. So you can take that. It is not copywritten or anything, right. So you can take that. But, it's a great question. So the way that we structure our team today, we have 6 folks, but we also supplement a lot of our work with outside agencies. And this is something where I would encourage any marketing leader, when you're looking at, there's really one of 3 paths. Do you exclusively bring it in-house? Do you exclusively outsource it? Or do you bring it in-house and then supplement the work that your in-house team is doing with an agency? And that's what we've been doing. So we have, I think one of the best digital marketers in the game. His name is Matt, and Matt is a phenomenal digital marketer that we have actually supplemented his work with an outside agency. So Matt's done all the SEO targeting. He's done all the ads for SEM and PPC. But now what we're doing is we're helping him deploy the budget with outside work or outside firms as well. And we've seen a lot of great work with that. I think, a lot of folks do struggle with one-off content creation or one-off video creation. My suggestion would be, don't force your team to do a lot of that work. I think that folks find that frustrating at times, and there's a really clean and easy way to outsource a lot of that at a fraction of the cost that a full FTE would be. And so we found a lot of value in having the core functions in-house, but also outsourcing some of that work as well. That's
really interesting. I'm always curious though, that with firms like yourself who do that sort of hybrid model, and it is different than the sort of, I like that sort of way that you described it, which is, insource it or outsource it or sort of do the hybrid model. And I think probably most people are a sort of some variation of hybrid, but trending towards insourcing. So I was asking somebody the other day, somebody like yourself, who what was it that they felt was the most important thing to insource? And I was actually really surprised. In their case, it was content and also managing their ABM program. So in your case, what's the most important thing? Like, what do you think? We've got to do this in-house.
I was going to say that as soon as you said content, I was shaking my head. Content is, and I can tell you why, because content is at the core of your SEO. It's at the core of your demand gen. It is really, content is not just a one page or a white paper or a blog that you're putting together and just putting out in the healthcare sphere to view. It actually, your content strategy is oftentimes your demand gen strategy. It's oftentimes your digital strategy, because you're not going to be doing ads, you're not going to be doing pay-per-click work on LinkedIn without content. And so it is really at the core of what you're doing, number one. And number two is nobody knows your business better than you and your team. So, if you have an outside team that's actually creating content that's really geared towards specific messaging, let's say it's readmission reduction or the nursing shortage or whatever it might be, your team has to really be gearing that message towards your buyer personas. If they're not, and somebody else is, even if it's 2 or 3 degrees off, it matters, and it's really important that that's consistent. So I would encourage anybody to break that down. It's
great. The content issue is so interesting. I've in the work that I do, in a few cases, I actually act as a fractional CMO, and then the rest of my business is being an agency. And what I found as a fractional CMO was fascinating. It actually forced me to become an agency. And the reason was that we had this, I'm not going to name names, but we had a really well-regarded agency, like one of the top inbound agencies, super hot company. And I'm sure outside of healthcare, they are, fantastic. Yeah. We found after a month, we realized it's like everything we were getting from them was generic. It was like, it all made sense. They had the whole HubSpot inbound marketing thing completely tricked out, completely working. But what they were, the content that they were creating was like, it was just very basic. It was really basic.
And we can go a step further than content and say that content, the overlap that you're going to find is actually the really important key is actually your content and product marketers. That's where you really start to fuel the fire, because your product marketers, typically in healthcare, your product is designed for a very specific purpose, right? It's not typically broad stroke type of purpose. It's at least the initial go-to-market is around a very specific value proposition. And so if that value proposition plays out in the product, your product marketer will know that, and your content marketer will know that. And you're able to tie all of those together. And I think it's an imperative to have that.
Very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it has to be expert, right? Otherwise, no one's going to read it for more than 10 seconds. So one of the things that you mentioned when we were last catching up was that you said you thought the thing that you guys where you really focused your efforts on was on the integration of sales and marketing, and you talked about sort of doing this seamlessly. Why is it? First of all, I think it's obvious why it's important. I mean, you described that. Your notion of the funnel and the funnel and the pipeline basically being one and the same. But why is it so hard? Why is it something which is? It seems like something like, well, obviously, but for most companies, it just doesn't work. It doesn't. Why is it so hard?
In my opinion, it comes down to aligned incentives. And I'm not talking about compensation. I'm talking about incentives of the organizations or the departments within the organization. And so, for example, what's the most fundamental difference between marketing and sales for somebody on the outside of it? It's, well, sales closes business, marketing gets the leads, right? But if you flip that and you say, hang on, marketing is not just getting the leads and sales not just closing the business. Because if you look at this on a horizontal axis, marketing actually transcends before the lead ever becomes a lead, all the way through to renewal, right? And beyond. That's actually marketing all the way across. And now if you're starting to align the different parts of the marketing organization with the different teams across there, because yes, you have marketing, but at the very top of the funnel, that aligns with your SDR team or BDR team. Mm-hmm. Then it goes to the sales organization. Then it may go to your client success or customer success organization. Then it may go to your clinical organization. And all I'm saying is, I think the alignment has to come with where there's shared incentives across both of organizations, whether that be sales and marketing, SDR and marketing, whatever it might be, and making sure there's shared incentives across the board. Otherwise, you just live in a different world. It's like we said before we even started today, and we all see the world from where we stand, right? So if marketing's standing in one place looking into sales looking in the other direction, of course they're not going to be aligned. I think one of the big factors that I've seen really propel the success of those organizations is really one of the most important things is constant feedback. You'll notice that a lot of times marketing organizations take something and they push it over the fence. They find messaging, they push it out. They find content, they push it out. One of the things that's missing is that 360 feedback from the SDR, sales, customer success, client organizations back to marketing. And I do think once you start to have that and break down the silos between the organizations, that's when you'll start to align them much clearer.
That's really interesting. Can you give a specific example of that? I mean, without going into, I don't want you to give away a competitive information, but that's just very, it's unique.
This is a great topic because I'll give you something really high up in the funnel, which is content engagement. So if you look at your website and you're doing, let's say, like we are right now, we're doing conversion rate optimization on the website, and we're understanding how we can uptick conversion across the whole website. One of the things that we look at is content engagement. What content is most valuable to our client or to our audience? What content is actually generating leads? What's the messaging behind it? But we don't just look at the data, we involve our SDR team in that conversation. So our outbound SDR team is actually involved with the conversion rate project, providing feedback as to when they're talking to leads, what did they find most valuable? Was it the white paper? Was it the blog? And you can take that and transcend that all throughout, all the way into product. That's why I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. If you look at this on just a linear basis, the thing far right is actually your voice of customer program with your product, marketing, and clients that really have to start taking off. And that's the feedback loop that you'll find all the way down.
Fascinating. So marketing also sort of providing kind of like leading indicator, customer insight. There seems to be a lot of interest in this particular topic. What does that mean? Not only what does that mean for the SDRs in terms of their scripts and what content they use to push out to try and get a hand raiser, but what you're saying is that you then informing product marketing, hey guys, we need to be looking at this particular use case because there seems to be a lot more interest than we realized.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, how many times have you heard a salesperson say, our marketing team doesn't have relevant message, or this doesn't resonate with our audience?
Right.
And then what's the follow-up question? Well, when's the last time you talked with the marketing team?
Yeah.
It's been a while. Well, let's develop a feedback loop there where we can constantly be refining the messaging, not the theme of the messaging. The theme has to stay the same, right? If it's nursing shortage or readmission reduction, whatever it might be. But the specific messaging around that theme can constantly be refined. And that's where the feedback loop comes into play. It's amazing when I talk to sales folks who say, well, I don't find, this piece of content helpful or that piece, or thematically, I don't agree with that. Why? And my next question is, have you talked with marketing about it, or your marketing team? And the answer usually is no.
Right.
And so I think just taking kind of the logical step is usually the best one.
Have you operationalized that? Or do you have weekly meetings? Is that how you do that kind of thing?
We have different feedbacks for different teams. So the SDR team will meet with marketing to have those conversations. We'll actually go through all the MQLs, for example. So any MQL we get that is rejected, or any MQL that we close out before it becomes an SAL, we'll sit down with the marketing team and actually go through that. Why? Because what's an MQL? It's essentially saying that the lead scoring has allowed for that lead to come across, right?
Yep.
So maybe our lead scoring methodology up at that part of the funnel needs to be refined. Same thing with sales. So with the sales team, we're sitting down, and if a lead is progressing from A stage to B stage, or we have 4 stages in our pipeline, if it's going from stage 1 to stage 2, perhaps there's a different piece of content that we're now using, or perhaps there's a different nurturing campaign that we're enrolling all of our contacts in. And that's why that feedback loop, you can use a lot of examples as you go throughout the buyer's journey. But, anyone I talk to in marketing and sales, having a foot in one or both canoes, would agree that the integration, a highly integrated tech stack, is really the secret sauce for a lot of this, where you're able to automatically nurture a lot of these leads as they're coming.
What's your tech stack?
Yeah, I mean, what my CFO would tell me, what don't you have? But we have a lot.
You're one of those guys.
We have we use HubSpot as our marketing automation engine. Okay. That ties into Salesforce is our CRM. We use SalesLoft as sales automation. We have ZoomInfo for contact database. Right. Definitive Healthcare does all the stacking within Salesforce. So
that's not crazy. That's a fairly, you can tell your CFO that's a fairly sort of, that's kind of fairly standard stuff. I mean,
I simply stop because we only have about an hour, so I don't want
to. But you haven't gone down the route of sort of getting one of these ABM systems like Terminus or Demand Base or anything like that.
Where our organization is, we have intentionally not gone down the ABM route yet. And that is, I would encourage folks that you really have to look at where your marketing team is and where your marketing organization is. If your team is not fully prepared to devote dollars, resources to ABM, I would suggest that you not kind of start double clicking on that work stream just yet. And that's an intentional effort that we've had. Is we will begin that in mid 2022, but we were not ready for that up until this point. So.
That's really interesting. And what was it, in terms of the transition, what is is it the sort of like we're just going to focus on a narrow set of accounts? We're just not ready to go there yet. What's the resistance? So, I've never heard this, by the way. This is a really interesting.
There's been a few different things. One is our organization sells into our ideal customers are typically large integrated health systems, hospitals, large home health agencies, and large hospice organizations. That's usually where we're playing. Right. What we find is that the sale for each of those is incredibly different by the size of each organization. So one thing that we knew was going to happen in 2022, and we've already told our sales team this, so if any of them watch or listen, it won't be a surprise, is that we're actually resegmenting our sales team to a regional, enterprise, and strategic accounts team. The strategic accounts team will actually have, as we've defined it, the strategic accounts, both new logo as well as current clients. And there'll be 3 individuals that are leading or taking the lead on those teams. One of the things we wanted to do was actually stand up that team and then begin our ABM strategy, because those were going to be the target accounts that we were going to go after.
Oh, I see. I see.
We actually wanted the marketing strategy to align with the sales strategy on that. That way we can have a continuous feedback loop on what's going on there. So
that's really interesting, because I think that I remember we talked about a year ago. I said, "Are you doing ABM?" You said you're doing ABM light, and I get why. So it sounds like a lot of the marketing things that you do are quite ABM like. But your sales are not really organized. Your sales team's not really organized to do ABM. That's very interesting.
Correct. Up until this point, we've actually called it ABS for account-based strategy, but we haven't marked it really, put the M in there yet.
I think your sort of discipline, your actual sort of it's very disciplined thinking that. When we were talking earlier on, you talked about the sales cycle. So tell me about, your, if you're comfortable doing it, tell about what your sales cycle is and what you can do in healthcare to actually shorten it. Because I'm damned if I know.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I think a few things. One, there is no secret sauce to the sales cycle. As you said before, sales cycle and complexity of the sale have direct correlation. And, in our worlds, that doesn't get more complex than maybe 4 or 5 committees and 10 weeks of red lines, etc. It takes time. So if anyone thinks they're just to set a precedent, their 10-month or 12-month sales cycle go to 2 months or 3 months. There'll be a different person.
You can get it from 12 to 11 months. It's
a win. So what we've done on our side, so we sell mid 6-figure average sales price into large integrated health systems. Typically, our buyers are CEOs, CFOs, COOs, or chief medical officers. So those are usually, depending on the size of the organization, that's usually the buying personas that we're going to focus on. What we're seeing is that we have about a 7-month sales cycle on our enterprise side. So
that's pretty good. That's really pretty
good. we've actually shortened it. It used to be 9.5 months. We've shortened it down to 7 flat, while also increasing the average sales price about threefold.
Well done.
So wow. I will say this: the secret sauce for us has been introducing ROI at the earliest possible point in the sales process. A lot of folks, what I've seen is a lot of folks reserve ROI until the pricing conversation comes up.
Yep.
But in fact, we've used ROI as a method to tell our clients how much of our product they're actually going to need based on their goals. So essentially, when we talk with somebody, they say, making up an example, we have a 12.5% CHF readmission rate, and we want to bring that down to 9.5%. Yep. Well, if you have 1,000 patients or let's say 2,000 patients, you're saying you may want, talking to you as your client, you're saying you may want 20 or 30 licenses of our product. Our ROI says in order to accomplish those goals, you might need 200. And that's really the way we've used our ROI, is not to justify the cost, which I think a lot of folks use that tool as, but rather we flipped it and we use it as a justification for the goals in which our clients are actually trying to achieve. And most of the time, what we're finding is that a client is actually setting their budget, their license ask based on a predetermined budget number.
Yep.
Versus setting the budget number on the goals that they're trying to achieve. And so we've really worked with our clients from the minute we have our first meeting is usually 30 minutes. We do, a kind of discovery, no demo type of meeting. The next meeting, we certainly front end load with a demo. We get into it, we go through the value props, the whole nine. But the backside of it is really where we start talking about the ROI and why the justification around the program is pretty strong. And so
that's a very thoughtful, strategic approach. And I can see why that would, you can see why it would increase the average sale in a way that the customer's going to feel comfortable about it. But also I can see why it would shorten it, because it becomes it's not a really, people talk about it being a consultative sale. It's kind of a consultative sale, but it's actually more like, it's actually a sort of value driven, it's more like selling like as a partner, a strategic partner to them.
Yeah. And I would tell any sales leader, I bet the farm on this. I'd say that your best sales executives or sales reps or account executives that you have, however you phrase the title, are likely the sales executives that know the ROI the best. And there is a clear correlation there in every healthcare organization I talk with, that the sales executives that truly understand the ROI are the ones that are able to sell more of your product. And so if you want to actually bring those B performers to A or those C's to B's, you have to spend time not in the clicks and what to do with this slide or that demo. It's actually in the ROI. And we've invested a tremendous amount of time in training our teams on the ROI models that we have.
That's so insightful. That's really, really very interesting. So I've got a final question for you, Royce, and that is, it's a question I ask everybody. So if you could go back in time, you could get in the Back to the Future DeLorean and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? Something that you wish you'd known earlier.
Wow. It's a great question. And I would say that the old phrase of be impatient for action, but patient for outcomes is incredibly true as you're growing a business. I think it's really, really important for healthcare marketers and healthcare sales folks to know that the more you change it and the more you tweak it and the more rapidly you do that, the outcome is not on the other side of that you're looking for. What actually is by setting a strategy and actually watching it bake. We just talked about a sales cycle.
Yeah, right.
If you're changing your marketing strategy 3 times in 7 months, like my sales cycle is, how are you ever going to know if it's going to work, right? But if you set it and you let it bake and bake and bake, and you make small adjustments to the broader strategy, you're going to be better off for that. I think the big thing I see other leaders struggle with in growth stage companies is their CEO asks for something, their COO asks for something, the board's asking for something, their 3 or 4 VPs are asking for things, and all of a sudden it just becomes a task rabbity type of role. You have to really take a step back and understand what the strategy is, then set that, and you should be impatient to set it. So if it's not set it. But then you got to be patient and let it bake.
And it takes real backbone to stick at it, particularly in a company. Company probably like yourselves, where you've got outside investors, where they're always saying not only what have you sold recently, but it's like, why aren't you selling faster? That's really hard to stick at it. That's fascinating. That's a great piece of advice, Royce. So, Royce, it's been a fantastic pleasure having you on the podcast. So insightful. I'm looking forward to going back and listening to this. Before we go, I just want to let anybody listening to this who may be listening for the first time or watching the video, that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, on Spotify, and whatever your favorite, Stitcher, whatever your favorite podcast product is. And you can also view the video through a link in the show notes. And we've got more guests coming up. We're going to do, 2 or 3 of these a month going forward. We've just been talking to my partners at HIMS about 2022, and we've got lots more coming up. And if you've got any suggestions, if you've got some ideas that you want to sort of chip in, you can email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com. That's adam@healthlaunchpad.com, or find me on LinkedIn. And with that, Royce, thank you again, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.